Alright you guys, this episode of Paradigm Profiles is called The EME's Micromanagement. Wino's responsibility was simple. He was responsible for doing the grunt work on the streets of Wilmington so that the Mexican Mafia could begin establishing its lucrative narcotics operations. All Wino had to do was use his standings and his influence within the gang Eastside Wimas to enlist some of the younger gang members and convince them to work for the EME. At the time when Wino was entrusted with this responsibility, he was in prison serving a 54-year life prison term for murking his estranged wife. Wino was also incarcerated hundreds of miles away in Centinela, a level 4 California state prison where movement was severely restricted and where resources were scarce. But he had a valuable tool that would help him accomplish this objective: a contraband cell phone, compliments of corrupted correctional officers who were either in some type of financial quandary or who just seen an opportunity to make some money and took it. Either way, without corrupted COs who are willing to smuggle in a good portion of these cell phones, a lot of these cases or these types of stories just wouldn't be possible. But having a contraband cell phone gave him the ability to communicate openly and effectively, something he wouldn't have been able to do on a prison recorded line, due to the fact that these phones were constantly being monitored and recorded by gang intel officers. Since around 2015, ever since the Mexican Mafia and some of the other more established prison gangs were released from the SHU, they've invested a considerable amount of time and resources into getting cell phones smuggled into the prisons. And that's obviously after understanding the worth and value that cell phones had to them. The proliferation and inherent need for cell phones coming at this point after 2015 also demonstrates what groups like the Mexican Mafia do. They exploit and capitalize off of whatever resources they have available to them for the sole purpose of self-enterprise. It's only obvious, because when you put this into perspective, one has to ask why the cell phone boom really began to peak after 2015, when this was a resource that was always available before then. The difference is attributed to the caliber of inmate that was infused into these mainline populations. After they opened up the floodgates and let all these guys out of the SHU in 2015, that's when the proliferation of cell phones really became an issue. You have inmates that are more sophisticated and who are more savvy, that understood the need and seen the purpose and value that cell phones had. Having the ability to facilitate and gather information is priceless, and when it comes to these criminal organizations, this is the grease that keeps the wheels turning. But if you think about it, cell phones haven't just become valuable vehicles that have been instrumental in orchestrating the drug markets, but they've also been instrumental in sanctioning and carrying out green lights. I could probably run a story on just the adverse effects cell phones have by themselves and give you example after example of why they're so detrimental in prison. But just trust me, groups like the EME, the NF, the AB, and the BGF have weaponized cell phones and have utilized them to carry out some of their most sinister and ominous agendas. These are the guys who try to take control of the drug market and who try to control the main lines, so these are the types of tools that they need. Getting the youngsters on board with working for the EME was the easy part. The majority of young, active, functioning sureños would jump at any opportunity to work for the EME or the big homies. Unless they were poisoned or led astray by someone with a personal agenda, they glorified the lifestyle. So as Wino was doing his R&I, research and investigation, asking questions about who was out there in his neighborhood and who was doing what, he eventually came into contact with a youngster they called Chivo, who seemed interested in the chance at making some money. Chivo wasn't someone you consider to be one of the sharpest tools in the shed. He had never been to prison, so he wasn't really familiar with the intricacies of prison politics and how they related to the streets. In Chivo's mind, this wasn't just an opportunity to make some bread, but he would also be helping the EME, the big homies, and this in essence would have a positive effect on his own standings on the streets. So Wino basically asked Chivo if he's interested in working with him and if he wants to make some money. Chivo then expresses his interest in assisting him and says something to the effect of, "I'm always interested in money." This entire conversation, amongst dozens of others, would later get intercepted by law enforcement. Apparently, just like the last story I just dropped on Big Romo from Blythe Street, Wino was also using WhatsApp and didn't believe in deleting his messages either. a mistake and a lack of being security conscious that would have devastating consequences on him as well. But the messages that these two exchanged back and forth made it very clear that Chivo was signing up for an entry-level position that offered a lot of work for little pay. In one example, his cut for delivering $900 worth of drugs and picking up the payment for Wino was $50. In a response, Wino struck up to Chivo after he completed his first assignment. He said, "This is just the beginning, homie. Don't trip. You're gonna make way more, just be patient." The messages, hundreds of which were displayed in court at a recent preliminary hearing, demonstrate how the proliferation of contraband cell phones in the California prison system has changed the dynamics of drug dealing on the streets, allowing incarcerated leaders to supervise young recruits from hundreds of miles away. And this, together with the constant cell phone communication, is where the micromanaging really comes into play. They call it keeping your channel abreast of everything that's going on. But this is really about asserting complete control over subordinates and maintaining a tight grip on how the profits are managed. Undoubtedly, Wino would have asked a lot of questions. How much each transaction netted, how much the connection charged to re-up, what the prices were on the streets, etc., etc. Because again, it's all about paying your subordinates crumbs, the very least as possible, so that their profits in turn are maximized. An FBI agent wrote in an affidavit that Wino, who was serving 54 years to life in prison for murdering his estranged wife in 2008, worked under Gabriel Sleepy Huerta, a reputed member of the Mexican Mafia. But Sleepy wasn't just your typical run-of-the-mill Mexican Mafia member either. Sleepy supposedly was assigned to the Mexican Mafia's three-man commission that basically controlled the ebb and flow of the Mexican Mafia. They were tasked with making the major decisions that impacted the entire organization. And this was all done using a legislative three-man council with a voting system. Champ, another high-ranking member of the commission, was doing life in federal prison. So Sleepy was somebody who obviously wielded a lot of power. As it stands today, the EME consists of about 140 members, and this is a conservative number, who control Sureño gang members on the streets, in county jails, and in state and federal prisons. Members of this prison-based syndicate once relied on associates and members of the streets to collect and secure their money, which came from selling drugs and the Mafia's taxation program. A meticulous process that consisted of taxing all the street gangs who were considered loyal to the Mexican Mafia. Of course, this was all done under the guise that this was contributing to the cause. What cause depends on who you ask, but this was a way to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars. Few had a clear idea of how much cash was being generated from the tax program. It was all confounded on trust. There's so much money involved that you can skim here and there. As long as you're not flagrantly ripping them off, they're gonna miss it. But cell phones have enabled these guys to micromanage their drug deals. Illegal for inmates to possess in the California Department of Corrections, phones are often smuggled in by corrupt staff and in some cases dropped inside prison walls using drones. If there's not a corrupt staff member in pocket, then the next best option is to have it smuggled in through a willing visitor in the visiting room. Inmates are always trying to find kinks in the armor or devise new ways to bring it in. Drones are another new radical method that are being used. The drugs are packaged and then they're affixed to a drone that will drop the package in an area of the yard using some type of box contraption with a mechanical release. Here's another example of how contraband was smuggled into a prison. The inmates obviously found a lapse in the prison security, either an unmanned tower or an area of the prison that wasn't frequently monitored. This obviously took the assistance of someone willing to risk criminal culpability themselves. But just use your imagination when considering what kinds of dangerous contraband could have been smuggled in using a backpack that size. I usually don't include state-generated statistics in my stories because in my opinion, they're often fixed to reflect some type of political agenda. But the numbers are astonishing. The California Department of Corrections requested a budget increase of $1.8 million in 2020 to crack down on contraband phones. The State Corrections Department reported seizing 13,450 of them in 2019, compared with 2,811 in 2008. So Wino seemed to have no problem obtaining phones. He sent Chivo a screenshot of 4, writing, "Just because I'm in prison doesn't mean that we can't have it good." I don't know what purpose he was trying to accomplish, but this just sounded like a form of unnecessary boasting. Later on, when this case would come to fruition, prosecutors charged that Wino arranged for methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin to be delivered to employees such as Chivo, who then distributed the drugs in smaller quantities to low-level dealers. The WhatsApp messages that law enforcement officials used to show that Wino acted as an intermediary with customers and suppliers, keeping his workers updated on arrival times, meeting places, and code words to be exchanged were pretty incriminating. This was micromanagement at its best. Chivo and Wino, both alleged members of Wilmington's Eastside WEMAs, have pleaded not guilty to charges of gang participation, conspiracy, and drug trafficking. At Wino's preliminary hearing, his attorney, Andrew Stein, argued that prosecutors failed to prove his client was the person sending the WhatsApp messages. How he premised this, based on the fact that Wino was the one who got caught with the phone, and that several of the references were made alluding to himself, isn't clear. But what is clear is that they have an uphill battle to fight in trial with the mountain of evidence against them. During the prelim, investigators testified that they did not obtain location data confirming the phone was at Sentinella State Prison, where Wino was at that time. But after reviewing the messages, listening to wiretap calls, and hearing from testimony from witnesses, the Superior Court judge who presided over the prelim, Judith Mayer, ruled she'd seen enough evidence to send the case to trial, noting there was circumstantial evidence that Wino wrote the messages sent under the name Grape. Even that was a poor choice of words, as it's easy for anyone to discern the relation between wine and grape. But again, the lesson in all this is how detrimental these types of messages can be if they're not deleted. Wino was a hands-on supervisor, requesting updates on deliveries and regular counts of his cash, the messages show. Once, when the total was $663 less than his own estimation, he told a worker, "Let's do the math again." His employees expressed gratitude for their cut, small as it was. Told he had $10,000 in cash on hand, Wino instructed Chivo to keep $100 for himself. "For sure, good looking," Chivo said. "I appreciate it." But truth be told, this was more out of respect than a true gesture of appreciation. Even these guys had to have known that they were being shortchanged and bamboozled. Yet, none of them dared to speak up, fearing that it might be misconstrued as a form of criticizing or questioning the integrity of the Mexican Mafia. In another message shown in court, Wino chided another worker for drawing unnecessary attention from the police. "I take care of my people, but I don't want them in here with me." Another Eastside WEMAS gang member named Gregorio Omaya, who they called Money, was one of Wino's first runners. According to one of their WhatsApp messages, Wino told Money in January of 2020 that a customer was driving to Wilmington from Moreno Valley to buy a quarter pound of methamphetamine for $350. Money worried about a helicopter hovering overhead, but Wino, apparently monitoring police radio traffic with his cell phone, told him it was headed elsewhere. The scanner said 3 suspects, one has a gun, he wrote. Again, the similarities between this story and the Blythe Street story that I just dropped are eerily similar. If you guys remember, there was an individual by the name of Youngster who was also worried about a ghetto bird hovering above the scene of his crime as well. But then again, ghetto birds are a lot more prevalent in Southern California. Out there, you not only have to worry about being rolled up on, but you also have to worry about being spotted by the ghetto birds who use infrared heat-seeking technology to locate you. After Money wrote touchdown to confirm that the deal went through, Wino told him that a woman driving a Nissan Sentra would deliver $1,600. Money responded by saying, "I'll count it in my pad, then put it away and add it to everything else. I'll give you a total amount before I go to sleep." At 1 a.m., Wino wished Money a good night. "Gotta get up early. I'm only getting a few hours sleep. Secure everything. Don't bring no attention to yourself. Got you," Money said, clocking out. At times, the messages show Wino grew frustrated with Money, telling the younger gang member he was trying to keep him out of prison. "Look," he wrote, "if I was someone else, I wouldn't give a F about anyone else or anything. I'm a lifer." There was the time Wino asked whether Money had posted photographs of heroin on social media. "This is real, what we do," he said. Indictments come behind this. It changes people's lives. Food for thought. This is real time what we do. It don't carry 18 months, more like 18 years. You're right, the last thing I want is getting myself in an indictment and bringing the team down, Money said, telling Wino he had already deleted his Instagram and Snapchat accounts. We don't need you in here, we need you out there, my boy, Wino wrote. Don't get yourself caught up just for 5 minutes of fame. Do it low-key and the game will last for much longer than that. Wino and Money mostly talked about selling drugs, according to prosecutors, but two messages appeared more sinister. Complaining or feeling like a sitting duck, Money said he was going to need a silencer. I've been wanting to go knock on the door like a high school student, trying to sell newspapers for my university, and if I got the chance, just boom, bam, done, Money wrote. But you know I gotta run everything by you first. Wino didn't respond. Despite his work for Wino, prosecutors said Money was beaten by his fellow gang members who blamed him for losing an assault rifle during a run-in with police. In a wiretap call after the incident, Ulysses Little Poste Gutierrez warned Money's friend not to go against the big homies in prison. You can't say no to them ninjas, fool. You know what I'm saying? Cause they're the ones that control the whole hood, said Little Poste, who is now serving 4 years in state prison after pleading guilty to gang participation. Prosecutors charged that Chivo took Money's place in the drug business after he was arrested on firearms charges. Anything you need, I got you, Chivo wrote to Wino. Prosecutors charged that Wino asked Chivo to deliver a half-pound of methamphetamine to a woman in a 4th-floor room at the Crystal Casino in Compton. TD, Chivo wrote, apparently confirming the $900 deal had gone through. Then Wino told Chivo to head to Plaza Mexico in Linwood, where a man driving a red sports car would hand him a sample of black tar heroin. Code is peluquero, Wino said, Spanish for hairdresser. Just when you see him say, peluquero, he gonna know what's up, TD, Chivo wrote 20 minutes later. Wino told Chivo to bring the heroin to the woman at the casino, who would test the quality, then await delivery of more. Count out 7 G's, homeboy, Wino wrote. Then, gonna drop you off a half key, which is 500 grams. Wino asked for a count of the day's earnings. You should have $1,600 cash with you, correct? Chivo said it came to $1,580 and sent Wino a photograph of the cash. I'ma recount it again right now, he said. It's all good, I ain't tripping on $20, homie. Wino kept some of his money in his safe, but he said he also used CASHAPP and Green Dot, both of which have become common methods for moving money around. I do a lot of business through there, he said of Green Dot, a prepaid debit system. I mean, racks. The next day, after driving 30 minutes to deliver a quarter pound of methamphetamine to a customer in Redondo Beach, Chivo was told to keep $25 for the $300 deal. Again, crumbs that probably didn't even cover his gas. Wino told Chivo, who drove a silver 2003 Honda Accord, that he'd get him a car to drive while making deliveries. He sent a photograph of a BMW to Chivo, who said it looked effing nice. What year is it? Chivo asked. It's a 2005, but it's still a cool-ass little SUV, Wino wrote. I don't know if it has any relation to the BMW Wino was driving when he allegedly pulled up next to his wife Veronica and shot her, but it's ironic that he just so happened to offer a BMW to Chivo. That night, Chivo asked, so what do you want me to do to start making some more cheddar? Wino didn't respond. The next day, Los Angeles police pulled over Chivo in his Honda, according to a police report. He was carrying a phone that contained the messages with Wino. I don't know what Chivo's status is as of today, but what I do know is that getting caught with a cell phone that has incriminating evidence on it is enough to get someone in hot water, especially when it results in people catching cases. The cold part about it is that it's a double standard. Not everyone is held to the same standard. Everyone's expendable, but an underling such as Chivo is more prone to being written off because he doesn't have any status. You apply the same circumstances to an EME member or someone who has status and he'll get a pass. Sometimes it comes down to who you are and what your status is, or who you know and who's backing you. It's a cold game, but that's how the cookie crumbles. On a closing note, despite a big influx of these same kinds of cases playing out with different people, business continues to go on as usual. Today, cell phones are still a very valuable and integral part of controlling, orchestrating, and managing the drug markets in prison. In the big scheme of things, I'm sure there are those that learn and capitalize off of the mistakes that others have made, especially when those cases result in Mexican Mafia-based indictments. But then again, there's still those that continue to make the same mistakes and who don't seem to learn from these lessons. Wino, Chivo, and Little Poste are just a few of those examples. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. As I've been saying, I'm going to continue putting out a lot more of these types of small stories, the way I used to put out profiles. So again, look for a diversity of content. If you guys like this story, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. But either way, drop a comment and let me know what you think. With that said, you guys have a good day. Keep pushing that positivity and be safe out there. This is your boy B, and I'm out.